welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Great Expectations. Chapter 10, Estella. I was so happy to see Estella soon that my high spirits overflowed. I ran around singing and laughing and being pleased with everything in life. While this was pleasant for me, I realized that Herbert might find this continual cheerfulness rather tiresome. I apologized to him and shyly confessed that I was in love with Estella. Instead of being amazed, Herbert replied in a matter-of-fact way, "Yes, I know." How do you know?" I stammered. "Because it has been written all over you since you first told me about your boyhood visits to Miss Havisham's house," replied Herbert. It was a relief and a pleasure to pour out my admiration of Estella's beauty, my own unworthiness of her love, and my hope to marry her. I confided that Miss Havisham undoubtedly intended that I should marry Estella, or why else would she make a gentleman of me and settle a fortune on me? Herbert agreed that he, like all Miss Havisham's relatives, assumed that this must be the case. But then a rather somber look came over his face and he said, "Now, Pip, I'm going to say something disagreeable, but first I want you to know that I, too, am in love. Her name is Clara Barley. I want you two to meet, but I mention her now so you will not think I have any hopes of marrying Estella myself." No such thought had ever crossed my mind, but I let Herbert continue. "When Mr. Jaggers laid down the conditions of your great expectations, he did not mention that you were required to marry Estella as one of them, did he?" I shook my head no. "Then you are not bound to her, and I urge you most strongly to detach yourself from loving her." "But why, Herbert?" I asked, confused. Thinking of her upbringing and how Miss Havisham has managed her thoughts and feelings. Think of how proud and cold Estella is. How much like Miss Havisham she is. I turned away. "I can never detach myself from her," I cried. "I adored her completely." This concern for my welfare touched me deeply, though his words about Estella's character upset me and stayed with me for a long while. It was about this time that I turned 21, and Mr. Jaggers gave me the handling of my money into my own hands. He allowed me to go into debt to a certain extent, but now I was resolved to live on my splendid income of £500 a year. I also received a birthday gift of £500 from my benefactor. Secretly, with Mr. Weckham's help, I used half the sum to buy a position for Herbert in a newly established shipping business. An honest and clever young man named Cleriker owned the firm and needed additional money and intelligent help. I contracted to make further payments in time so that Herbert would one day become a full partner. When Herbert told me of a chance meeting with Cleriker and the offer of position, his ecstatic face was reward enough for me. Herbert need never know who his benefactor was, and he grew happier day by day in his new career. Estella, meanwhile, had become an instant success in London and was enjoying every minute of it. Miss Havisham had arranged for her to live with a widow who had a daughter Estella's age. This family was well-bred and had many society connections. Because of this, Estella began to call on me constantly to escort her to balls and parties and shopping. I should have been happy, but I wasn't. She treated me like a half-brother or like her secretary. Even though her many admirers were jealous of my position at her side, she showed me no favors. Instead, she said to me one evening, "Pip, oh Pip, will you never listen to any warnings about me?" "Do you mean warnings against being attracted to you, Estella?" I asked. "If you don't know what I mean, you are blind," she replied. I would have said that love is blind. I always hesitated to press my love on her, since I should know she would obey Miss Havisham, and I hated to act like a burden on her, so I was not happy. But in the next breath, she ordered me to escort her to see Miss Havisham, who wanted her to visit, but disliked her traveling alone. As we sat by the coffin after dinner, Miss Havisham could not take her eyes off Estella. She had witch-like eagerness to hear about Estella's conquest from her own lips, for Estella wrote to her regularly, and Miss Havisham already knew the names of discarded suitors. When I saw Miss Havisham's eyes glitter with evil delight over this, I realized that this was her revenge on men. Revenge on the men who had left her on her wedding day. Miss Havisham grasped Estella's hand, eager to hear more, but when Estella pulled her away, The old lady had a taste of her own medicine. Terribly hurt, she cried out, "Estella, you are tired of me." Estella, with a composed face and calm tone, answered, "I am only tired of myself." "You stone, you cold heart," screamed Miss Havisham, waving her stick about. "You have trained me to be that way," stated Estelle. "But not to me," cried Miss Havisham. "Only to them. You must love me as I love you." Estella shook her head. "Mother by adoption, I owe everything to you. I will do anything you ask, but I cannot do the impossible. You taught me to be cold and hard. You taught me not to love. I have learned your lessons well." I could not have watched the scene any longer, and I left the two women and went into the garden. But even there, Miss Havisham's moans and pleadings reached my ears. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.